Greetings and welcome to WFED 6270. This is Module 2. In this module, one of the first things we're going to talk about is one of the first steps you do once you examine and determine your rationale for marketing. And that is, you have to determine your marketing objectives. So for the agenda for this module, we're going to talk about how do you determine your marketing objectives, and then we're going to talk about the community survey. So what are the steps to determining your marketing objectives? Well, first you have to examine the big picture. And what I mean by that is you've got to think beyond teaching. What are you doing with your program? You also have to kind of ask the question of, is your program involved in any community service or outreach, any type of CTSO activities? And for those that are new to Career and Tech Ed, CTSO stands for Career and Technical Student Organizational Activities. Are you doing any type of fundraising or SBEs, which stands for School-Based Enterprises? So for an example, an SBE would be if you're a marketing teacher having a store. So it's a way in which you can generate revenue for the program. And literally every Career and Tech Ed program has the potential of having a school-based type enterprise. You also have to ask the question of, are you involved in any partnerships with local business and industry? Are you utilizing the cooperative method of instruction? The second thing you have to do is you have to obtain some type of informal and or formal feedback. And the feedback you want to obtain would be from the community, from students, from parents, from peers, and potentially, if you're at a tech center, from the homeschool. And the only way to do that, or one really good way to do that, is to survey the community using what's called a community survey. And then after that, that's when, once you have adequate feedback from the community, from students, parents, peers, homeschool, if that's the case, then you can start thinking about developing a marketing plan based on those findings. If you don't take these necessary steps to determine your marketing objectives, then you're really just kind of shooting in the dark. You're not sure where it's going to hit. So why obtain feedback? Well, one is it helps you determine your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And there are informal ways to obtain feedback, and there's formal ways. So for example, when I first started teaching marketing at a tech center in Roanoke, we had a co-op program. And so that was a part of my instruction. So I would go around to local businesses and ask them, what do you think about maybe taking some of our students into your business as a part of the marketing co-op portion of my courses? And what I found was that a lot of them were really hesitant to do that. And so I would ask them, well, what do you know about our program? And what I found was they knew very little. So just asking people, general public and business and industry people, what do you think about our program? Do you know anything about our program? That's an informal way to obtain feedback. A formal way to obtain feedback would be a community survey, or what's sometimes called an opinion survey. And that's where you ask the opinion of students, parents, potentially local businesses. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about the formal feedback. The first thing you got to think about is, what type of opinion survey instrument are you going to develop? And there's tons of different ones out there. You could survey high school students to determine the lack of involvement or some of their concerns with being involved in your program. You could survey business owners on the value of career and technical education programs to the community. You can survey 8th to 10th graders to gauge their attitudes towards either your program or career and tech ed in general. You could survey parents of middle and junior high school students to see what type of reluctance, if any, they have with their children signing up for your courses. Now, I want to show you one example of a high school survey. This was a survey of 100 students in a high school that a technical center gets students from, so what sometimes was referred to as a homeschool. And what they found was that 56% of the people that they surveyed had never even heard of career and technical education. 47% Now, because it was built into the survey, because the survey can serve as kind of a marketing tool in a sense, 47% are interested in taking culinary arts. So probably the question was framed something like, did you know that that you would have that you as a student of this particular high school are able to take a culinary arts course, and if so, are you interested in taking such a course? And so they found that actually many of these people would be interested in taking a culinary arts course. The same goes for 38% in regards to interior design. Only 3% were interested in taking drafting. And I think if I was the drafting teacher and I saw the results of this particular survey, that would put a big red flag up. I would want to make sure that I was able to maybe target this particular high school to get them more swayed and interested in taking drafting. 65% would not travel to different schools to take CTE courses. So this is one of the biggest problems with the model that we have set up in a lot of the Michigan schools. We have these brick and mortar tech centers that are away from the comprehensive high schools. And this is a great example of how that is sometimes our biggest hindrances from enrollment. 41% would rather take music than CTE, and that's very well and good to know. Only 19% knew that CTE classes offer college credit, which in this day and age, almost every career and technical education program offers some form of college credit. And 81% would be more interested in taking CTE classes if they offered college credit. So in this one survey, they found a wealth of knowledge, and so now they could utilize that knowledge to help with their marketing efforts. Now, there's other types of formal feedback that you can examine without ever having to do anything with a community survey, although I would almost say these are add-ons or extra things that you can do, extra examinations that you can do. One is community voting results. For an example, Portage Schools, which is where I live, hands down voted for an increase in millage in order to support the schools. Very strong community voting results, meaning that the community overall is supportive of the schools, and that's usually a good sign, obviously, for career and technical education as well. You could also look at enrollment trends. So you could look at what has been the career and technical education enrollment trends. Is one of the reasons why you have low enrollment because overall the Career and Technical Education Center has lower enrollment? Or are you the exception to the rule where enrollment has actually been increasing, but for some reason yours is either flatlined or declined? These are ways in which you could obtain more formal feedback about your program. So just wanted to mention them. So what is a community survey? Well, what I'm asking you to develop for this module will be a kind of short community survey. So what is a community survey? A community survey is a comprehensive study of the employment climate of your community. It'll look at things such as the current employment picture, future employment requirements, existing training programs that are in place, just to look to see if you can help reduce redundancy, employment trends such as turnover or technological changes or job shortages. And what this community survey can do is not only give you some feedback about maybe what do they think about your program, but obviously you can start to see that this can definitely kind of show you the economic climate within your particular field of study. But it can do so much more than that. So if you ask the right type of questions, you could maybe find where you could place students. You could have maybe internships or externships. You can find potential donors of materials, machinery, or funds. You can find places that would be interested in allowing class trips, or where maybe folks from that business would come in and talk with your students. And then also, it's a potential for jobs for current students and our graduates. So depending on the questions, and I have some examples I'll show you in a little bit, depending on the questions that you ask in the community survey, you can really get a lot of information that can help really boost the rigor of your program overall. So you can look at it as it's a systematic way to determine the possibilities within your local community. And it can be done formally or informally in the sense that, I'll explain it in the next slide. So what is a formal community survey? Well, this is something that I'm going to have you design, but just to kind of give you an idea how this would work out, you identify what you're looking for within the survey. So, you kind of have to have a goal here. It could be to find out the employment climate or demand within your community, or maybe it's to find a potential partners for materials exposure and student jobs. And then you have to identify a program-related business within a certain radius. So, like for instance, how far are you willing to drive, or how far do you think you'd be comfortable with your students driving in case this does turn into a placement for your students, and so I just put a 25-mile radius on there. It can be whatever you need it to be. And then you've got to design a survey instrument, and then you've got to implement that instrument. So here you go. I'm pretending that we're from Battle Creek, and so we did roughly 20-something mile radius. And so then that gives me an idea of start to search for businesses. And let's say I'm an accounting program. So within that area, we've got all these towns. And so I just go on to Google. I mean, there's many ways to do this, but this would be one. And I find all of the accounting businesses within that 20-mile radius. And this is just a small sample of them, right? And then now I'm starting to collect contact information where I can send my survey. And so then I look over at Portage, let's say, and I do the same thing. And all I'm doing is I'm collecting all the different contact information of places where I can reach out and send this survey to, contact them to try to get an idea of if they will become a resource, not only of knowledge, but potentially for placement of my students, either while they're in training or after graduation. Now, at some point, obviously, either before or after this, you're going to have to design the survey. So when you design the survey, obviously you want this to be a confidential survey that's only used for educational purposes, and you want to make sure you explain that somewhere in the survey. And then you've got to think about what are they going to be the employer questionnaire items. So things such as number of employees and job description of each. Does your firm provide training for employees? Do you plan to expand your business? All of this is great information for you. Here's an example I pulled from a community survey. As you can see, it starts out with the name of the business, the number of workers, and then you see that it has job descriptions. Are these people full-time, part-time? You may not want to do any of this, but I just want to give you an example. And then if you look at the questions, does your firm provide training for the employees listed above? This is important for you because, one, it gives you an idea of what type of training do they do. Do they outsource it, or is it on-the-job type training that happens in-house? Could potentially you become one of the trainers of these employees? Have you, within the last 2 years, experienced difficulty in obtaining capable employees? Do you plan to expand your businesses? Okay, so you can start to see here what possible job openings will you have for vocational or career and tech ed graduates. What are some of the new and emerging occupations that you foresee in your business in the next 5 years? And then number 9 is a really important question. Would your business cooperate with a local school in providing on-the-job training for students, yes or no? If yes, how many students will you accept? How many hours per day? How many days per week? Right? Name some of the training areas you'll provide. So all this could be wonderful information. If you send this out to 150 different businesses within your community and you get back no more than 25, it's still wonderful information, even if it's just such a low return. This is basically asking the same questions, just looks a little bit different. Here's another community survey asking some of the same questions, but then sometimes it's in a little bit more detail. And of course, you can pause this and look through these and view them. Here is another example of a community survey, or what they're calling a business survey. So it asks some simple questions such as, in 5 years, will you need more or fewer employees? What is your biggest or most frequent complaint about new employees? This is great workplace readiness skills stuff for you to utilize. Always great ammo to use when teaching. And where do you find the most of your employees? Classified advertising, referrals, this type of thing. So here are some survey design tips. One is you got to proofread, and then you got to proofread again because you don't want any misspellings or grammatical errors. And then you got a pilot test with at least 3 people. And the importance of pilot testing is that it will provide you any type of opportunities to find bias or any type of confusing wording within your questions. You also want to make sure you have clear, concise directions, and then make sure not to be too wordy on your survey because you want them to be able to fill this out as quickly as possible. Now, I am going to have you guys do basically a survey in a Word document. You may find that in your industry it'll be better to do it in some type of online survey software such as Question Pro or SurveyMonkey, but you want to make sure that you're very kind of deliberate on that. If it's an automotive technology or automotive mechanic, then you may want to think about not doing that because these are people that are going to be working on their feet all day, and they're not going to want to take the time to sit down and log on to SurveyMonkey and do it. Probably a paper copy or a face-to-face interview type of questionnaire would be the better way to solicit that information. So if you are thinking about this, if you are mailing, you need to have return postage. You also need to make sure that you provide a reasonable return date. Give them a couple weeks. You want to make sure that you follow up by phone after 5 days, 10 days, 14 days. If the internet, all that is the same. If it's door-to-door, I would say have your students do it. So if you are going to do that questionnaire that I referenced in the last slide, where you actually are going to ask them face-to-face, it's harder to say no to a student than it is to say no to a grown adult such as yourself. So maybe train your students to do this. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to have to apologize for the knocking sound that you hear. It's summer here at Western Michigan University, and there's a classroom right next to my office, and they are removing the asbestos tiles, I kid you not, right now. And so I'm sure I'm catching something that'll kill me eventually, but nonetheless, we're going to muscle through the last couple slides here. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was effective strategies and ideas for marketing to all. The main thing that you can pull out of the community survey could be potential business partnerships. But while we're on the subject, other things to do for your program to market to all would be community service projects. And we'll talk more about each one of these, by the way, as later on in the class. Public and community exposure, homeschool exposure, your CTSO, embracing online space, school-based enterprises, which we've already kind of briefly mentioned in this presentation, and then press releases. In terms of business partnerships, they can be very valuable. Your advisory committee, your community survey can all help in identifying these business partners. And it's important for many marketing events and strategies, but you got to be careful about this. Typically, businesses aren't going to give you something for free without getting something in return. So beyond doing the right thing, you want to show them that this is positive exposure for them, that you'll mention them in a press release, let's say, or you'll have a banner at this event that you're putting on highlighting their business, or there'll be a plaque that you'll hang on the wall. You also could look at this as high-quality workers, your students that you can provide your students, which, you're calling high-quality workers, that, you can give them a cut of any type of profit that you make off of some type of fundraiser, let's say, or that you'll sell their product or their service or highlight it at whatever event is going on or whatever you may be doing. So these are all things you can do that would benefit their interests beyond just doing the right thing. And so it's important that you understand that and that you try to sell them those benefits. Now, forming business partnerships with business and industry is incredibly important. I've already mentioned a lot of this stuff, but one is that it's a great place to place your students for co-op and internships and externships. They can supply the program with product and machinery and donations. And it's easier to promote an event or strategy to news media if it's tied with the local community in business and industry. Also, having these partnerships makes it more real to your career and tech ed student. By being able to bring in, let's say, the guest speaker, or going on the class trips, or being placed in a kind of a temporary internship. All that makes it very real to the student. Okay, so let's finalize this presentation by talking about the project that you're going to work on today, or this particular module. The objectives of this is, one, to identify businesses within your area that are related to your program's career pathway, and then develop a survey to gather information about regarding potential program resources. And so the directions is, one, I want you to identify 20 businesses related to your program's career pathway. So if you're a marketing teacher, you locate businesses that are related to marketing, sales, and promotion, let's say. In addition to locating the business, attempt to find as much contact information as you can, such as addresses, phones, and emails. And I want you to compile this in some spreadsheet or table, such as what I have below. And then the second thing you're going to do is you're going to develop a community survey. Now, although I do say here that you can do it using survey development software, that would be fine, but you also can do it using Microsoft Word. So you're going to develop a 15-item survey that attempts to gather the following information. One, the number of employees they have, some type of questions related to the hiring climate. Are they hiring? What's the forecast for that? What's the possible future job openings that they envision? What's the desired education and certifications of new hires? Are they willing to help your program? So I'm looking for some questions related to their willingness to help your program in some way. Looking for some questions related to the perception of the career and tech ed program or the school that you are in. And then also asking some questions related to emerging trends and issues. So essentially develop 15 questions or prompts that relate to all of these, so that I'd be able to read through those 15 and be able to mark off each one of these noted lists that I have here. If you have any questions about this project, please feel free to contact me.